Hello and welcome to this 10-minute yoga tutorial for beginners. Starting out at the top of your mat, we're going to go into our first pose, which is mountain pose. So bringing your feet about hip width apart and pressing down into all 10 toes, the outer and inner edges of your feet and your heels, engaging your quadricep muscles and lifting your kneecaps up. Releasing your arms along your sides, palms facing forward, tucking that belly button in, releasing your shoulders down, away from your ears. Keeping your neck long and lifting the crown of your head up towards the ceiling and finding a focal point straight ahead and taking a couple of deep breaths here. Mountain pose helps to teach good alignment, and it also sets the tone for the rest of your standing postures in your yoga practice. So making our way into our second pose, which is forward fold, bringing your hands to your hips. You could keep a micro bend in those knees, shifting your hips back as you open your heart forward. Tuck that belly button to the spine, making sure that you lead with your heart. You don't want to hunch forward, okay, because then you could hurt your back. So lead with your heart, release your arms down. Grab onto the back of your thighs or your calves. Release your head. Taking a couple deep breaths here. Allowing those feet to sink down into the mat. And then making our way into our next pose, which is plank. So bending those knees, bringing your hands underneath your shoulders, stepping back with your right foot and then the left. Keeping your hands underneath your shoulders and pressing those feet back behind you into the back wall. Release your shoulders down your back, tuck that belly button to the spine, engaging your leg muscles and those arms. And finding a focal point straight down on your mat. Taking a couple deep breaths here. It's a great core strengthener, one of the best. Now releasing your knees and sinking your belly down to your mat, elbows in. Coming into an upward facing dog. So pressing into the tops of your feet, bringing your hands underneath your shoulders, elbows in, opening your heart forward and up as you come up. And release your shoulders down away from your ears, releasing your glutes a slight bit. You can lift your thighs up off the mat, but you could hold it here for now. If you wanted to look up a little bit more, as long as it feels okay with your neck. Taking a couple deep breaths here. And then making our way into tabletop position, tucking that belly button in. Bringing your hands underneath your shoulders, knees underneath your hips. And transitioning into our next pose, which is downward facing dog. So from here, you could place your hands, the hands width forward, pressing into all those fingers and your palms. Bring your heels up and keeping your feet about hips width apart, lifting your hips up and back. You could always keep a slight bend in those knees depending on how tight your hamstrings are. So coming into an inverted V, wrapping your outer arms in and then press your thighs back. Allowing your head to just hang freely. You don't feel that you have to get your heels all the way down to the mat. Always listening to your body. That's the most important thing in your practice. Making it your own practice. If you wanted to get your heels down, you could press those heels down to the mat. Tuck that belly button in. And then making our way into our next pose, which is low lunge. Bending those knees. We're going to step forward with that right leg. You could always help it halfway and then all the way. Release that back leg down. Wiggle that foot in between your hands. Pressing into that right big toe to help stabilize you in your pose. Keeping that front knee aligned right above the ankle. And then bringing your hands to your hips. Releasing your shoulders down away from your head. If you wanted to bring those arms up overhead, releasing the shoulders down. Lifting the crown of your head up towards the ceiling and finding that focal point straight ahead. Taking a couple of deep breaths here. And then release. We're going to step forward into a forward fold, transitioning into our next round of poses, which are standing poses. Grabbing onto your thighs and rolling up into mountain. So we're going to come into warrior one pose. We're going to keep those feet starting out with your feet hip width apart. Usually it's your alignment is heel to heel, but we'll stay feet hip width apart, sliding. I'll slide that right leg back so that you want those toes on an angle. So the toes are pointing towards that front right edge of your yoga mat, and then pressing down into that left big toe, bending into that front knee, keeping it in line with that second toe, bringing your hands to your hips, and you're going to shift your hips forward, okay? So really pressing down into that, the back right foot, and extending that back right leg. If you want to stay here, you could stay here, or you could bring those arms up. Release the shoulders down away from your head, and finding that focal point here. And then bringing your hands to your hips and stepping forward. Swiggling those, walking it out a little bit here. Okay, coming into warrior two next. We're going to step back again with that right foot. This time just opening up that back hip a little bit more. So your feet are always, with the warrior one and warrior two, your feet are about a leg's width apart. Okay, so you're aligning that back arch with your front heel in your warrior two. Pressing into that left big toe to help stabilize you. Making sure that knee doesn't turn inward, keeping it in line with that second toe, and then bringing those arms up. So you could always judge too how far your feet need to be. They'll be right underneath your hands, okay? Release your shoulders down away from your ears and finding that focal point straight ahead. Engaging your core, lifting the crown of your head up towards the ceiling. And taking a couple of deep breaths here in your powerful warrior. Now we could go into our next pose right from here because it's the same stance. Bringing your hands to your hips, coming into a triangle pose. Okay, the one difference is we're going to extend through this front leg. So really pressing into that left big toe for that good stability. Extending through that front leg. This one's a little bit more challenging. Always keeping a micro bend in that front knee to make sure you don't hyperextend the knee. Then we're going to reach forward with that left arm while grabbing your block. Bend through that knee, grab your block. Okay, you could place it on the inside or on the outside of that leg. I would say the inside to start. Okay, and then extend through that leg. Reaching forward and shifting, hinging forward from your hip, placing your hand on your block, opening your heart forward, opening your heart up towards the ceiling, and then reaching up. So stacking those shoulders, you could look down at your left fingertips or look up at your right fingertips depending on your balance. Taking a few deep breaths here. And then making your way out, stepping forward into mountain pose. All right, so we're gonna make our way into our last pose. So keeping those feet hip width apart, coming into our forward fold, opening your heart forward and up, and release down. Take a breath here, stepping our way back into our high plank. And then releasing your knees down, coming into our child's pose. So bringing those big toes to touch, Sending your hips back to your heels and releasing your forehead down to the mat. Now, if you can't get that forehead all the way down to the mat, you could always stack your palms. Release your forehead down to your stacked palms or to your stacked fists. You could also use a block too. And then releasing down. You could always come down into child's pose if you can't hold a downward facing dog for that long and you need to take a break. Child's pose is the one pose that you could always take a break in. Softening your facial muscles. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.